Hi, it's Matt here from Go Green Autos. So this video is about these vans, the Nissan ENV200 electric van, and it's intended to be a new owner's guide or like a quick start guide, just getting in and using these. So if you're a new owner of one of these, hopefully you bought it from ourselves at Go Green Autos, but this video will just cover the basics so you can get in and start using it without reading the manuals, because, you know, we don't read the manuals, do we? So first off, keys, bog standard lock and unlock, but these do have keyless entry. So as long as the key is in your pocket, you've got a button here on both doors, and that will unlock or lock the vehicle without having to get the key out of your pocket. And it's the same at the back, you've got a button there to unlock the back doors. So when you're in the vehicle, again, you keep the keys in your pocket because it is a keyless start. There's nowhere for the keys to go, and the vehicle detects when the keys are inside or outside the vehicle. So to start the vehicle, you put your foot on the foot brake and you just simply give the stop start button a quick push. And you have to give it a good 2 to 3 seconds for the van to boot up, and when it's ready to drive you will get a green go light at the top there, which is what you get on most electric vehicles. If you're too quick and you push the start stop button to start it up and then immediately drop it down to drive to start driving, and you haven't given it that 2 seconds, the light will flash and it's saying it's not ready, so you end up putting it to park and starting again. So you just have to be a little bit slower with it. And at this point the go light is on and we're running. Of course there's no noise or vibration because there's no engine. It's all utterly silent and smooth, but we can now drive. So with our foot on the foot brake, we can drop it down to drive, and at this point you just drive it like a normal automatic. You've got park, reverse, neutral and drive, and it shows you up on the screen there which gear you're in, whether you're in park, reverse, neutral or drive. So we're in drive there, ready to go forward. We lift our foot off the brake and obviously release the traditional handbrake down here. However, there's one big difference, which is regen braking or regenerative braking. So let's start with the basics. So on an electric vehicle, when you put your foot on the accelerator, you're just putting electricity into the electric motor. That's then turning and then spinning your wheels and driving you forward. As soon as you lift off the accelerator, you're not putting any energy into that motor anymore, but that motor's still spinning because your vehicle's going forward, and at that point that electric motor turns into a dynamo or generator and it starts creating electricity and it puts it back into your battery pack, and that's the regenerative braking effect, and you want to capitalize on that. So in reality what you do is you just read the road ahead a little bit more, lift off the accelerator sooner and slow down on the motor. It's a bit like engine braking on a normal petrol or diesel. So you lift off the accelerator and while you're slowing down, the motor is charging your battery and you're getting a bit of range back. So what you do is you read the road ahead better than maybe you would have done, lift off sooner and coast for as long as you can, and while you're coasting the vehicle's slowing down and you're getting some charge back. If you touch the brakes, that's fine, obviously you've got to touch the brakes to stop, but if you find you're going onto the brakes all the time, you're not lifting off sooner, you're probably driving it like you would drive a traditional diesel, and you're not harvesting any of that energy back, so you'll find you'll have poor driving and poor range. So you really need to lift off much sooner and coast as much as you can. On these vehicles you also have a B mode, so when you're in drive you can toggle that across and we go into B mode, and B mode just means braking mode, and it basically increases that regenerative braking effect to give you a bit more charge back, and you can toggle between B and D as much as you like when you're driving, and we can see there it's changing up on the screen. So D mode gives you light regen, B mode gives you a little bit stronger regen, but to be honest, on an ENV200 van it's pretty light regardless. The regenerative braking is very light in both modes. Other vans have much stronger regen. So some people might just drive in B all the time, other people will toggle between the two. The most efficient way of driving it is to drive in D, read the road ahead more, lift off much sooner, coast as much as you can, and if you're, let's say, coming up to a corner, you're getting that regen effect back, the regen braking, and you feel like you want to go for the brakes, then you just toggle it to B mode, and that slows you down a bit more. And then if you need to brake more, then of course you do hit the brakes. But if you use it like an extra braking mode, exactly as it's called, but use it like a sort of handbrake, then that's the most efficient way of driving these, because that encourages you to coast more, and you will get maximum range if you can just use this as an additional brake as and when you need it. Another question I get asked quite a lot is, do you put it into park or neutral when you're stopped at, let's say, traffic lights or a junction or whatever? And the answer is no. Just keep it in drive and keep your foot on the foot brake. You're not doing the vehicle any harm. It's just an electric motor, and this is no more than just a switch, really. The neutral mode really is only there if you're getting recovered onto a truck and you want to release the drivetrain, and park you wouldn't use until you've come to a complete stop and applied the handbrake first. And on that point, I would just say, whenever you're stopping the vehicle, put your foot on the brake, apply the handbrake, so the weight of the vehicle is on the brakes before you go into park. You don't want to let the weight of the vehicle fall on the park pin on the transmission. Instead, you want the weight of the vehicle on the physical handbrake. So next I'll talk about very quickly the controls. I'm not going to cover everything. Things like white lights and wipers is no different to any other car. So let's look at the dash. Obviously we've got our speed up there. This line across here is our power meter, so treat it a bit like a rev counter in a normal car. The vertical line there is our starter mark, as it were, and as you drive you'll get white dots go along there, and that shows the power you're using. So the more dots, the more power. So you want to drive with as few white dots along this bar as possible. Obviously if you're sticking your foot down you're going to see them shoot up, but to drive economically you want to drive with as few white bars as possible. And then when you're lifting off the accelerator and the vehicle's doing that regen and you're charging the battery, that's when it drops on this side of the white bar. And again, the more bars the better, the more power you're getting back. It's basically just showing power usage, power being gained on this side. The next display here is your battery pack, your fuel tank, and it's in an arc here, and at the moment that's showing pretty much full. I think it's about 90% or so at the moment, but the blue and white bars along the bottom is showing the graduations of your battery pack, and when it's up here it's fully charged, and when it's down here into the red section it's getting to the low area. Here we've got an estimated range. This is based on driving history and temperature and how economically the vehicle was recently driven. So sometimes you can take that with a huge pinch of salt, and that's the case in this vehicle. This one hasn't been driven for a very long time. It needs to be driven and charged before that range will show something that's a bit more realistic. But if you've got a van that's being driven by multiple drivers, you might get someone who will drive it very fast, very inefficient, and the next day the range meter is going to be based on his driving, because it's based on recent driving history. So do take that with a big pinch of salt, and it doesn't necessarily mean that's exactly what you're going to get. The next thing down here is the eco light, and we have a button here which gives us our eco mode. So we have two driving modes: standard, which gives you full power to everything, and eco. And what eco does is it just maximizes range. So it does two things: it reduces the power to the motor, doesn't give you full power, and it changes the mapping of the accelerator. So it just encourages you to drive a bit more gently and accelerate a bit more gently. And it also caps your top speed, I think at 56 miles an hour or something, 50 or 60 miles an hour. The other thing it does is it reduces the power to the heating system. So obviously your heater does require a lot of energy to make heat in the winter, and when you're in eco mode it just sort of dulls the power to that, so it makes your heater work a little bit more gently, again to maximize range. So you find for normal driving it's perfectly adequate to drive in eco. To be honest, in eco mode they're about the same performance as your traditional diesel van. So particularly if you're in a city, it's fine to drive around in eco all the time. It's only when you're out on a main dual carriageway or so and you might want to drive a bit faster, you might take it out of eco to give you the full power. But in the winter, if it's really cold, you might want to take it out of eco again just to give you full power for the heating system to defrost the vehicle. On this side of the dash, you've got a screen that you can change with these buttons down here, and the top left button changes what you've got up on the display. So I'll just go through a couple of them. Firstly, the charging times. So this vehicle has got the upgraded 6.6 kilowatt charger, and when you've got a vehicle that's got the upgraded charger, you have two charge times here, a 3 kilowatt charge time and a 6 kilowatt charge time. If you've just got the standard charger, you'll have only one charge time there. The standard charger is a 3.3 kilowatt charger. And this is just showing us we've got 40 minutes left to bring this battery to 100%. If I push this again, we will go through a few other screens. The other one that is useful is this one here, which is showing our driving economy, and we'll have a little bar, a little tick on this bar to show us what our current average driving economy is. And generally on these you want to aim for 4 to 4.5 miles per kilowatt hour in the summer, and above 3.5 miles per kilowatt hour in the winter. If you're doing only city driving where it's much lower average road speed, and then you can get up to about 5 miles per kilowatt hour in the summer. So if we continue through this, next we've got the battery charge indicator, which is just the same information as we've got here. And then next we've got the battery temperature. Most people will never see a difference on this. If you're doing multiple DC rapid charging, then your battery could get hot, and if it does, you need to stop and allow it to cool down. But if you're doing fast driving and multiple DC rapid chargers, then your battery might get hot, but most people will never see that happen. And then we push it again. Next we've got battery capacity. That's showing us our state of health at the moment. We've got all 12 out of 12 bars lit, and then we can scroll through to various other things, including your settings where you can customize various things on the van. And within those settings you can do things like set your maximum charging rate. Some people might set it to, let me just go down and we'll see, you can set it to 80% or 100%, so that will limit the battery charging to 100% to 80% if you want to preserve the life of your battery. To be honest, I think in reality you'd only want to do that on a 40 kilowatt hour van. On the 24, that's going to limit your range too much, and most people generally wouldn't bother. But if you're only driving very short distances a day, then yes, you could limit your battery charging to 80%, and it might help in the long term. But to be honest, there's not an awful lot of evidence to show that it makes a huge lot of difference. The other thing you can do is set a time you want the preconditioning to work, and also set a delayed charging if you've got a nighttime overnight cheap rate tariff. I'll just explain what that preconditioning is. Down here we've got a climate timer, so you put a time that you want to leave in the morning, and then when the vehicle's still plugged into the charger, it will switch on and get ready for that time. So in the winter it will put the heating on, get the cabin warm, melt all the ice off the windows, and get your vehicle ready for that time. So when you disconnect from the charger, you've still got 100% range because your battery is still charged, but the cabin's already warm. So maybe you can do your drive without the heating on at all, or with the heating much lower, because the cabin's already warm. And then it does the same in the winter as well, but instead of heating, it's going to cool the cabin. So it's a very useful function if you're charging the vehicle overnight at home. Then certainly during the winter you should be using that. Firstly, it's very nice. It's lovely to get into a warm van in the winter. It saves you scraping the windows as well, but it's going to give you maximum range for when you're doing that winter driving. So next I'll talk about charging. To release the charge flap at the front of the vehicle, it's actually down here. It's quite well hidden. Down here is two levers. One is for the charge port, the other one is the bonnet release. And then at the front of the vehicle we have got two charge ports here. Because this is a rapid van, we have the DC rapid charging. If it's a van without the rapid in the title, you won't have that connector there. But you will have this connector. So the orange one here is your AC charging. So this is what you would use typically at home overnight, but also any AC public chargers which you might find in car parks, supermarkets, typically destination charging, will all be on AC, and generally you would use the cable that comes in the van to connect this type 1 connector here to the charger. And all home and public charging posts are type 2, but of course the cable that comes with the vehicle sorts that out. On this side is our DC rapid charger. It's a CHAdeMO 50 kilowatt charger. You don't have a cable that connects into these because the cable is always on the rapid charger, because it's about that thick, because it's delivering DC power straight into the battery. So this is what you would use when you're out and about during the day to extend the range quickly. So when you plug into here, it will go from, on a 24 kilowatt hour van, it will go from 0 to 80% charged in only 30 minutes. So you use the DC rapid charging when you want to quickly extend the range during the day, and you use the slower AC charging typically overnight to bring it back up to 100% ready for your day's work the next day. So I'll just show you the charge cables that come with this particular van. So this is your AC charging cable. Every vehicle should come with one of these, and this is the type 1 connector here which goes into the front of the vehicle, and this is the type 2 end which goes into the charger. And as I said, all home, workplace and public AC charging always has that type of socket on the end. And then here we have what's called a portable charger. So we've got the same type 1 cable that goes into the AC port at the front of the van, but this time on the other end we've got a 3-pin plug. So this allows you to charge the vehicle on a normal main socket. These only draw 10 amp. They do drop the current down to 10 amp purposely, so they do take longer. That's going to charge at a rate of about 9 miles per hour, whereas if you're using a proper wall charger, you're going to get a rate of about 18-19 miles an hour if it's a 3.3 kilowatt charger, or if it's a Rapid Plus that's got that upgraded 6.6 kilowatt charger, it's going to charge at about 25 miles per hour. To adjust the electric mirrors, the switch is in a rather awkward position down here, low on the dash near your knees, but it's all sort of standard switch gear. You've also got a button down here to turn off a timer schedule. So let's say you're charging overnight and you have a timer set on the dash to delay your charging to sometime during the night to take advantage of a cheap rate tariff. But if you've plugged in throughout the day and you want an instant charge, you can push that button there, and that temporarily turns off the timer, so it starts charging straight away. But when you're DC rapid charging, it's going to ignore that timer anyway. That's just for AC charging. Whenever you do a rapid charge on the DC CHAdeMO port, it's going to charge instantly regardless. If you have a puncher, these have a full-size spare wheel mounted under the floor, and to drop the cage to access that wheel, you need to undo that nut there. And your toolkit, your jack and your wheel brace is mounted underneath the passenger seat, often in a sort of vinyl bag there, all the tools, and your jack will be on this side. And to get your jack out, you need to just unwind it with your fingers to lower it down to then slide it out. Some of these ENV200 vans have the optional folding passenger seat, so you can pull the lever up there and the backrest will drop down and gives you a little writing table or somewhere to put your lunch. And on the driver's side, there's also a storage tray here under the seat to give you a bit of additional storage. These vans have a camera at the back, just above the number plate here, and when you're at the back of the van, particularly in the winter when it's wet and muddy roads, it's worth rubbing your thumb across the lens of the camera just to keep that clean. And on an Ascenter van, when you put it into reverse, the camera image comes up on that screen there. These play a tone out the front when you're driving at slow speed, so that's your pedestrian warning system. It cuts off at about 15 miles an hour, but on the Nissans that tone sounds very much like squeaky brakes, so it does sound like you've got rather rusty brakes. But you can turn that off with that switch there, and that just temporarily turns it off. So if you want to be silent for some reason, that will turn it off. But as soon as you've started the vehicle again, the next time it defaults to on every time. If you're new to an EV, one thing that's quite easy to do is to get out without turning it off, to leave it all running, and that's because it feels like it's switched off anyway, because obviously there's no noise or there's no rattly engine running. With these, if you try to leave the vehicle with it running, you get a bleeping when the door is open. You then get another bleep there to prompt you that something is wrong, and if you try to lock it, you get that bleeping noise there telling you if something's wrong. So that could be you've left it running, or one of the doors is ajar, but that's telling you it cannot lock the vehicle because something isn't quite right. And the other thing to remember is we've got daytime running lights down there at the front, so if they're still on, the vehicle's still running. You also get that same bleeping if you're trying to lock the vehicle with the keys still inside. Just quickly looking in the back, obviously you can open the doors 180 degrees with that handle there, just like you can on most vans, and that allows you to load in the back with a forklift. And this van isn't ply line, so this is as they come from the factory. Apart from the rubber floor, that's a Nissan accessory, but they're all fitted with these rails along the sides, one on either side, but because most vans are ply lined, this tends to get covered up. So if your van is ply lined, you've probably, well, most likely still got that rail behind, but you might find you've got a bag of these snap-in lashing hooks in your glove box, but that's what they're for. It's for these rails, which often get hidden with the ply. You also get a light in these up there, and having the switch in the middle position allows the light to come on and off with the opening and shutting of the doors. And as with all electric vehicles, the brake lights will come on by itself when the vehicle is slowing down, even though you might not have touched the brake pedal and you're slowing down on the regenerative braking effect on the motor. So I think that's about it. That covers the basics, but obviously for everything else you're going to have to read that user manual, which is probably in your glove box there.